This week, Emmet and Kumar talk about Vaughan and Fiona Staples' Saga. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for keeping this show going. Join them at patreon.com/deconcomics. If Patreon isn't in your budget, you can also send a one-time donation of any amount via PayPal to donate@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
This is Kumar.
And this is Emmet.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Kumar and Emmet in Melbourne.
It's a cold and bleak day in Melbourne. First day of spring.
Yes, cold by Australian standards. and spring by Australian standards. And I pronounced the name of the show almost correctly.
You got it. I think you got it.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Saga.
Yes.
By Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan. Artist and writer. It's always listed in that order in the credits.
Since 31.
Okay.
Since issue 31.
Okay. And now before we start, I need you to let me have a preamble.
Absolutely. I was going to hand it to you because you haven't read it?
Okay,
before?
yeah. So I hadn't read it. Now,
go
I even wrote down, I almost scripted out everything I need to say before we start.
Go.
And it has to do with why normally we do this over Skype, but we're doing it face to face. I'll get to why. Mm-hmm. So, because you're going to need to interrupt me during the body of the podcast.
Okay.
Once I started reading it, I realized we need to talk about it face to face. So, and this is also one of those episodes where I'm probably going to get into trouble.
Okay.
Because I've done some in the past which went against where my opinion was against popular opinion, and we got some angry notes from listeners. Okay, so...
Well, can I interrupt you immediately?
Okay.
And just point out that Saga, for all its acclaim, is actually a very divisive book.
Okay.
And it has been since the very start.
Okay, that's interesting, because I didn't know that.
Okay.
All right, so... But basically, I wanted to do this face-to-face, because I'm going to need you at some stages to look me in the eye and tell me that I'm wrong.
Or agree?
Okay. Okay, we'll see.
We'll see how we go.
We'll see where we're going.
Okay.
So I'll tell you about my previous experience with Brian K. Vaughan.
Go for it.
So I read Swamp Thing because I was a Swamp Thing reader, and that was the first reboot sort of thing for a sequel following the end of that initial 180 issue run or whatever. Yep. And I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And it was only like 18 or 20 issues, and I was like, okay, whatever. And I didn't even know the name of I don't think he was really in anybody at the time.
No.
I don't know how he got the gig, and I was like, whatever. And it just dissipated from memory. And then I read the first 2 volumes of Why the Last Man. Mm-hmm. And I read those first 2, and I loved it. And I loved every issue ended with a cliffhanger. And it really reminded me of the same time I was watching 24, the TV series. And it had the same kind of, that level of really kind of hook you in TV. It was that kind of thing. And I loved it. And then, so somehow I stopped. I guess I didn't have money. I was in Japan at the time, and I was having to get books shipped over. And I thought, okay, I'll get back around to it. So then I managed to get like up to 4 or 5 out of the library, and I started I reread the first 2, and I kept going. I was like, I hate this. And the things that I hated were everyone sounded the same. Every character had the same voice and the same zinger lines. It was like one of those Aaron Sorkin shows. It was like West Wing, where everybody's just on. They're on all the time, and it's always snappy dialogue at each other. You can't, if you close your eyes, you can't tell who's who. And the cliffhangers at the end that rhythm became so repetitive, and there was a kind of smugness about it. In the dialogue and in the cliffhangers, like, look how awesome this is.
And it's funny you should say that, because a lot of reviews of his work frequently compare him to, and you said Sorkin, but there's also Joss Whedon.
Okay, I was going to get to that for a different reason.
Sure. But that sort of know-it-all...
Yeah, I never got that as much from Joss Whedon. from Sorkin, I felt like I didn't feel like it was smug or self-important with Sorkin. I felt like, does he not realize that different people have different voices? So like everybody was super smart.
Sure.
And okay, so now we get to Saga. So it's been several years since I tried Y the second time and didn't like it. And people are recommending Saga. So hey, if you like science fiction, you should check this out. And I'm like, I'm always looking for good science fiction.
Sure.
And and then I thought, well, it's BKV, but maybe I'll give him another chance. I will get around to it eventually. I'm looking forward to reading this series, which everybody's saying is a good science fiction series. One day I get an email from you, and it says, hey, you want to talk about Saga because they're coming up to hiatus?
Yep.
And I thought, okay, yeah, because, I never liked his other work, and I wanted to give it another chance. And I said, yeah, and I want to talk about it because I didn't like his other work. And you said, oh, that's interesting. Now, you didn't tell me whether you liked it or not, which this was a...
Poker face here.
This is great. This is one of the most amazing emails I've gotten from anyone, because you didn't say, oh, I really love it, I'm looking forward to talking about it. There was nothing like that. You said, oh, that's interesting, that I did not like his previous work. So I'm going to start the episode by saying right off the bat, I loathed it. I detested it. And it was to me, it was everything that was wrong with Y dialed up to 11.
Right.
The dialogue was so poorly written, not in that it was badly written dialogue, it was poorly written because everybody sounded the same. Again, it was the same thing. And every issue ended with that full page. Now, the full page cliffhanger. Now, maybe I shouldn't have read 54 issues in 20 days. Maybe that is kind of part of the issue with the rhythm getting on my nerves.
Can I just interject on that point? Because I think there's something interesting there. Because this is not the first hiatus Saga's had. They actually had a hiatus after every story arc.
Yeah.
And then they'd release the trade. So it's almost like from the very start they had this rhythm built into how people would read Saga. So you'd have the issue-to-issue readers, but you'd have the trade-to-trade readers as well. And we were clearly being left with the idea that this is the tempo or the speed at which you should be reading this story.
Right.
And now, as you say, we've got this collected run that goes all the way up to the 54th issue?
54.
Yeah. And yes, you did the marathon. You did it all. And I do wonder if that was exactly what they did not want. Because there was these sort of pauses all the way. Now we have an indefinite hiatus. They say maybe a year. Well, who knows? And it's left us at this sort of cliffhanger again, but a very sort of devastating cliffhanger for readers of the book. It's a strange series in how it's come out.
Based on what I've seen of the letters pages, and again from the buzz I've heard around, which apparently was not as all positive as I thought from what you told me before, I think there's a super community there.
Yeah, very devoted fan base. Yes,
and it's in the letters pages. There's all these pictures of cosplay, and it always starts with some self-congratulatory note about how great this story is, or how great the art is, or something. Or, oh, can you believe we did that kind of thing? And it really seemed like a little clubhouse. And it kind of reminded me of some of those other fan scenes, like the Twilight scene that's out there. Now, we did an episode, I did an episode with Tim about Miss Marvel not too long ago. And I thought, okay, I can see this as a competent, well-crafted book. I don't like it. And I wonder, I do think I have sort of sociopathic tendencies and can't sometimes, I don't understand
I'm kind of worried now that you've invited yourself into my house.
Well, I mean, it's like characters, I'm not psychopathic, but sociopathic. Like, I can't empathize with these characters that everything, this is so great, and
It's a really interesting point of comparison, because I think Miss Marvel works as a family drama, a high school drama, and I like it, and I understand. It's not necessarily for me, but I understand its value.
I felt like
Brian K. Vaughan stuff, it's never really for me, and I never really understand what people like.
This is interesting because
I don't have the context.
Right. Well, Miss Marvel, I thought, okay, am I I'm a middle-aged man. Maybe this book just isn't for me, because
Sure.
I can understand why a 12 to 15-year-old would really dig this. But for me, I felt like this is a rehash of Spider-Man, and I'm just not that into it. But I can see how it's really good, and some of the gags were great, and I had genuine laughs, and I'm like, I'm never going to read this again.
I think you're talking about two very different experiences.
Now, with this, I was like, hang on a second. These letters are coming from everybody of every age group. I can't blame my age or anything like that. There's something else about it is not connected. And I'll tell you, one of the things that one of my unfair reactions to it was, like I said, people said, hey, you should read this. This if you're looking for good science fiction, go for Saga. And I was like, okay, went in. Issue 1, this is not good science fiction.
I would query it being science fiction.
Exactly.
It's space fantasy. It's it's Star Wars. It's
yeah. So
fantasy
I used to say there was space fantasy, which is Star Wars, and I used to say there was space fable, which was Star Trek, which is even way further off the map.
Sure.
Like, none of that stuff matters. The message is what matters. And I felt like with this, I was like, from issue number 1, page 1, they introduced this planet, which is supposedly the biggest planet in the galaxy.
It's landfall.
Landfall. The biggest planet. This is the words on the page. The biggest planet in the galaxy.
Are these Hazel's words, or are these the declarative narration? Like,
I don't know if there is declarative narration, so it must be Hazel.
It's Hazel. So this is a child's point of view.
Well, we don't know how old is she when she's narrating it.
We don't know that. We don't know that. But she's.
I think she's an adult. But okay, listen.
Go for it.
Okay. We're told it's the biggest. We are told. Let me put it in those words. We are told it is the biggest planet in the galaxy. First of all, there are 3 winged species that have evolved. One has bat wings, one has insect wings, one has bird wings, at least. And we know on Earth that those evolved independently. Yet these are all part of apparently the same species of the planet. Within 10 pages later, the main character, Alana, who is pregnant or has had a baby, they've had a baby, is unable to fly. They're on another planet. She's come from a planet with, I would presume, the highest gravity of any planet in the galaxy, and she can't fly in this other planet? And I'm like, this is the same issue. It's the issue 1. It's not 10 issues later and they've forgotten details. And it infuriated me because I came with an expectation that I was going to get Joe Haldeman's Forever War or something of that level where somebody really thought through stuff. And it's not. It's like it's kind of like the worst of Grant Morrison. Not that Grant Morrison's bad, but he was kind of like all these characters and aliens come in and they just look weird and that's it. They're just, oh, look at this kooky thing. The end. There's almost never any unpacking of any of the. There's no science in the fiction.
Can I interject now?
Yes, please.
All right.
I would. Yeah. My preamble was done before.
Listener, the veins are popping.
Okay.
Let me just tell you that right now. The veins, they are a popping. There are some interesting things to note there. First off, apparently this is an idea Vaughan has more or less had in his head since he was a kid.
Okay.
And I before I read that, I was going, this seems like a very adolescent science fiction fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
So that scans for me. This is something that he's had in his head.
Yeah.
It's been percolating away.
Like The Fifth Element.
Yes, exactly. Luc Besson. Yeah,
He wrote when he was 14 or 13 or something, right?
Well, wrote or loosely adapted from Jodorowsky, but let's not go there. The court case was settled. But with Vaughan, he had this thing in his head. Skip ahead in time. He's now an adult. He's had his second child, and he's reading storybooks to his children.
Okay.
And I can see those two influences, the influence of a childish imagination, which a lot of writers hold on to and carry with them into their adult career, and then being a parent, and then channeling that role of the parent into your writing as well. So hence we have Hazel's narration, which is storybook-like, and he's sort of riffing on that tone. So I can see all of that. And you're right, the very first page of the series, we are told, and the series is called Saga.
Yeah.
It's called Saga.
Yeah.
So your mind immediately expects, as you say, you were going Forever War, but your mind immediately expects space battles and like galactic and sort of epic stories, and like going from following the Greek model all the way up to science fiction writers of the 20th century, where they were basically reinterpreting Greek mythology into space opera. You can see all of that, but then the book starts and it's a family drama, and it's all about this messed up couple. They're on the run. They're being chased by various perverted bounty hunters, and they're in for some crazy shenanigans, and that's it.
So you've kind of hit on something, which is I don't know if I was expecting Forever War exactly, but I was hoping for that level of thinking about some scientific aspect of it. But certainly I was expecting, speaking of Luc Besson, something more the Valerie and Laureline, like, what was it? Valerian, sorry. Yep. Where it's like adventure after adventure and all different, like Star Wars expanded universe kind of.
Yeah.
Here's all this other. No, they're on the run for 54 issues, and they're still on the run at the end. We've got a cliffhanger, and guess what? They're still on the run.
Yeah, but also, here's the other thing. There's another factor to this, your confusion over the fan base and what the common element is to all these people.
Yeah.
This comic book, to me, is as close as we've gotten. And, like, listeners, please correct me, because I'm sure there are other examples. But it's as close as we've gotten to the heights of Chris Claremont's X-Men run, with Byrne and the likes, in that it's a soap opera. It's a soap opera in space. The story just keeps moving. There's always a cliffhanger. There's always a dramatic conclusion, and then that leads you into the next storyline or the next action beat. But there's no middle ground. There's no sense of stability. Everything's constantly in flux. And that soap opera is driven by its setup and then delivery of a show every week.
Yeah.
This follows that same sort of deadline-driven model.
I disagree on the aspect that I think soap operas will run through storylines like newspaper comic strips and move on to the next storyline. And I feel like we're still in the on-the-run storyline with...
But yeah, we've had different points along the way where you had the kidnapping of the kids by that janitor character.
Yeah.
And then you had that whole storyline where Alana became a soap opera star. Like, she actually... It gets a bit meta where Brian K. Vaughan's going, hey, now we're doing a soap opera.
I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Let me try to find it. Where she's talking about people who complain about the soap operas. And the line was, if watching it is that painful, why don't you do literally anything else?
Yeah.
And I felt that was speaking to me,
Yes,
and I thought,
I
have to read this for a podcast. I'm sorry. I would literally have stopped at issue 1 or 2.
Yeah.
I would literally do anything else, but I'm reading 54 issues for this podcast. But I felt that line was like, hey, haters. Because I can tell, like, when those kooky characters, every character shows up and is totally kooky and has some crazy design, which they don't go into. You don't see anybody else from that species except for the TV guy. I thought that was really clever, because the people with the TV heads, I thought it was so dumb that they never explained why they have TV heads. And then when you meet, like, the poor people, they've got, like, old... like with dials, TVs with dials, and the king has this huge, like, 6-foot
You can
screen.
see that be a teenager's drawing book. You can see that is Vaughan drawing in his notepad.
Well, it's interesting because it's the
14.
only idea that he expands on for more than a second. Like, everything else, like, why do they have 3 different types of wings on this planet? So... that kind of, I can totally see how there would be certain fans that would lock onto that and would be like, wow, I love these ideas that are hitting me in the face, and it's like Doom Patrol was, where it's just crazy ideas all the time, but there's some kind of, in Doom Patrol, there's some dwelling on those ideas.
Yeah, and there's emotion. There's this emotion that is sort of more dark and deep in Doom Patrol than in Saga, which is the rush of excitement or the rush of shock.
This is the real crux of it.
Yep.
Okay, so the science fiction thing too, and that was the other thing that reminded me of Joss Whedon, was that, what was that show about that was 13 episodes?
Dollhouse? Or Firefly?
Firefly. So I only watched 1 episode, okay?
Sure.
And everybody says, you gotta watch the rest of them, they're good. I said, yeah, I will. But, I mean, I hated the theme song, number 1. I thought, I can't watch that theme song again. Number 2,
He wrote the lyrics himself.
The first episode, I was like, this is Cowboys in Space. And there's no element in it that could not be set on Earth. in the West. And I thought, this is not the kind of science fiction I typically go for. And with Saga, I felt the same thing, because he wasn't unpacking any of those things. I thought, why couldn't this be taking place on Earth, even Earth in the future? There was nothing, and that to me was part of it. Is, and all those things that show up and they're never unpacked, is I felt like there was a real emptiness about it. Like, I felt like thematic emptiness. Like,
well, that's why I compared it to a soap opera. That's what I mean.
Why he's kind of he seems to be pushing some kind of war story, but to me it doesn't make any. It's a juvenile view of. I don't think it makes logistical sense. Like, I don't think you could have this war that's been going on across the galaxy and not people. And I can't believe that the largest planet in the galaxy, those people have not mated with the enemy race. So I'm assuming, I don't know what their population is, but let's assume it's a lot, and they've never gotten it on with the enemy before. I felt it was like Iron Man 1, which is like a super fun movie, but had a very adolescent view of the military-industrial complex. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, this is a kid's version, and I felt like Saga was a kid's version, and yet at the same time, it's a XXX comic, and it's like, I felt really disconnected from it. Like, where I felt that there was a disconnect there. Like, why is this? This is like a kid's comic. This is like The Fifth Element, which is fine, but at the same time, you seem to be pitching it at over 18s, at least. Usually, you have to be over 30 to be comfortable, like, just like not care when you see that stuff.
Yeah. Well, again, like, the comparison to Uncanny X-Men for me was because Claremont and his artists on that book tended to introduce visual elements or scenes that were somewhat fetishistic, and there was that sort of sexual excitement running through Uncanny X-Men, where, you know, there was the Hellfire Club, for example. Everybody's getting done up in naughty wear. And, you know, like, there was that sense that it was aimed at an adolescent reader who knows, as they're reading it, that this is naughty. There's something there's something going on here,
right.
And they know that. But there's nothing directly pornographic in Uncanny X-Men, but there are all sorts of hints at things.
Yeah.
And in Saga, it's interesting is, you know, the Overton window has moved on, so now you can be far more explicit, but it clearly is hinting at something even more explicit again.
Yeah.
But I think the teenager who would read Saga, and I do think it has a very strong adolescent fan base, but, you know, not to say that anybody of our age or older would also not like it. I can see them reading it and going, oh, this is exciting because it's teasing out something. And we haven't talked about Fiona Staples' art at all. But I do like the way she draws the naked bodies in the series. I do like the sort of gloss to the nudity that is suggestive of pornography, and these characters are frequently, like the robots in particular, they're frequently like watching pornography on their television heads, you know. But I just love her art generally. Like, I love everything she does. I love the lettering. I love Hazel's narration is actually part of the art. I love her creature design. I love how she takes this sort of inchoate adolescent notebook scribblings of Vaughan. in that's how I'm pitching. I'm not saying that's what she was delivered, but I'm saying she takes that and then she makes it art. Like, she transfers it. It's like those, you know, those memes where people send in kids' drawings to an artist, and then he actually renders this fantastical thing that this child has drawn. I feel like that's what Fiona Staples has done. She's visualized this thing, so it's so solid and beautiful, and I really enjoy the art. And I think what kept me reading Saga, because I stopped around the 30s with Saga, because I just can't take it. The repetition's killing me. Like, it's just the setup and conclusion was just really, really getting to me, and I stopped reading it. And I would listen to podcasts or I'd read comics articles, and people would talk about Saga's amazing, Saga's fantastic, and I could not understand why. I couldn't get it beyond, as we said, the sort of enjoyment of that shock value that runs through the series. But what did make it pleasant for me was Staples.
Okay.
And just the way she depicts like space and landscape and the environments these characters are in, and then some of the like Gus was her creation, that little the seal sea herder. Say that 3 times fast. He's entirely her creation. That's not from that's not from Vaughan. That was her idea, introduced into the book. And he's one of my favorite characters. I love Gus.
Well, he's interesting because he actually sounds different from the others.
He's got a different personality.
Yeah,
he's gruff.
Yeah,
he presents as cute, but he talks about how he's a bit scarred, like he's done some bad things, and like, it's a really interesting contrast. So I love everything she brings to it. And then when I pitched to you that we would do this episode, I then finished Saga up till the concluding issue, and yeah, I was compelled to read it because it moves you along as a reader. But I did just have that same sense of exhaustion at the end.
Yeah. I think for me, though, okay, the art is great, but it's one of those, I've flip-flopped with comics over the years. I've gone through periods where I didn't care about the writing and just bought comics for the art and was like, I love looking at this. And I've gone through periods where, all the ones I bought to look at are now sitting on the shelf and I haven't looked at them in a long time, and flip-flop back and forth. It's one of those situations where I was like, I'd love to see her drawing something else instead of being stuck on this thing. But obviously she must be super into it. For me, the narrative drive didn't hook because I didn't care about any of the characters.
And I was really interested in hearing what you think of the book because you're a parent. And I'm not a parent.
Right.
I don't have that stake.
Okay.
And I had read the first issue of Saga, and I put it down and went, no thanks.
Right.
And then I interviewed, there's a Sydney-based comic creator called Paul Kijeji, and I interviewed him for another podcast I did years ago called Beard and the Geek in October 2012. And he, during the interview, just started talking about Saga. He just started how much he loved Saga. He loved because he's the father of a daughter, and he really related to that, and he really wanted to. That's what he had made this direct connection with. He likes his science fiction, so I was moved by his testimony, if you like, and I went back and I tried reading it, and I was like, is it because I don't have that connection? I wondered if that was what was holding me back. So I was curious, but as a parent, do you think it addresses parenthood in a convincing way?
It's funny you should say that because now I'm like, I've got a biracial child. Like I should even be more, something should be really hooking into my heart.
Yeah.
No.
Wow.
So Hazel I thought was, even as a child, like not the narration was badly scripted. I found sometimes she sounded, when she was 5, sometimes she sounded 3 and sometimes she sounded 15. And maybe that was deliberate, and maybe BKV was like, sometimes my kids say things that sound like what a 15-year-old would say. No, it's the cadence of the speech didn't sound right to me. At times, I don't know. I've never, my child's life has never been in danger except for within the few days after he was born. It was like, there's, he had to go to the hospital for a thing, but I don't know. I just felt like the entire situation that was wrapped around it was so phony. Like the war, this business about the war and all the science fiction stuff which was just all so false to me that I didn't care about the 2 parents who were the main characters. I didn't care about all the secondary characters that came in, and I felt like I could see through it. Like, this is supposed to be a lovable character because of XYZ. You're supposed to love this character because of ABC. And these things, see how this person's really, this person's a gruff war hero or something, but it just felt like all the other stuff which I should be letting go of, which I should not care about. Don't worry about that stuff, Kumar. Don't worry about it. That stuff I could not let go of. And it felt like, like it kept coming back to me, why is this set in outer space? Because there's things in there which are explicitly like the explicit homophobia. Why is this set somewhere out in the universe? Why? This is exactly Earth. And there's this kind of suburban, we get flashbacks of the will of his life, and it's just a suburban existence.
That was very strange. Yeah.
And, his father beats him like a suburban dad, and we find out the father's been abusing his sister, and it's just so prosaic. And it's like BKV is like, we're gonna put some real character tissue in here, and it's there. But on the outside, I was going, why is this in outer space? Just put the whole thing on Earth. You can set it 100 years in the future if you want. It'll still work out. Or 100 years in the past, there's probably a way to work this exact same story out, except you won't have your kooky guys in it, and it might be something more touching. Now, I will say about Hazel, the narration started off good. Around the middle, I thought, there's some kind of wisdom in here. There were some lines, probably around the 30s mark, maybe. I even wrote down some of them. I don't know if I'll be able to find them in my notes right away, but like there was one with the one line, the whole point of having enemies abroad is getting to ignore the ones back home. I thought that was a great line.
And that's the idea that Landfall and Wreath have actually exported their war.
Yeah.
Because they're so close, that the planet and the moon are so close, they've actually conducted their war in all these other planets across the galaxy.
Yeah.
So everybody else has been sucked into their war, whereas they get to live in relative peace back home.
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of, okay, that's a little bit of wisdom in there. But, I mean, the rest of it was so kitty war kind of stuff. But then I felt, okay, so then it went way down. And it became Sex and the City narration, where it was like, meanwhile, over here, Dad was having trouble with this thing. And then you get this scene, and it just became a thing to transition that was not serving any purpose, and that started to really grate on me as well.
Okay.
And I felt like all those things were pushing me away from trying to feel something about the characters, but I also felt like all those characters were coded with almost cliches to try to make us like them.
On that, can I talk about some of the characters?
Please do.
Coming up, examining the characters in Saga, comparing Saga's take on war with that in Garth Ennis's war comics, putting ourselves in the shoes of enthusiastic Saga fans, and more. First, don't forget, one way you can help this podcast is by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support.
Are you willing to follow me on a journey and risk getting lost in a swirling maze of past ages, protected only by our red indestructible capes as we break through the final unexplored realm of the time barrier to explore the fantastic Silver Age adventures of the world's greatest hero, Superman? If so, join me each week on the Superman Fan Podcast, as together we'll follow the Man of Steel, his cousin Supergirl, and his closest friends, Perry White, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Lana Lang, Batman and Robin, and others in Superman's never-ending quest to defend truth and justice in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, World's Finest Comics, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. Go to the supermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com, available on iTunes and most other podcast aggregators. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Medium, Flipboard, and Stitcher. And after you listen, feel free to send email to supermanfanpodcast@gmail.com. And unless you request otherwise, I look forward to reading your comments on future episodes. And don't forget to wear your red indestructible cape, standard safety equipment for traveling through the time barrier.
All right, so I mentioned that Gus is my favorite.
Yeah.
Because he's adorable, but he's also hyper-violent, which I like. That's a good combination.
Yeah.
But the other character that I was immediately drawn to, and again, this is a credit to Fiona Staples, was the Stalk, who is another bounty hunter. She's a spider lady. She's a giant white spider lady with spider legs and no arms, and the armless torso always draws my eye. Like, I always find myself looking at it because it's so odd. And then she's got multiple eyes as well. She's a really interesting character creation. So of course she gets killed off really early, like really early in the series, and she more or less lives on through hallucinations that the Will has in various states of dissociative identity he seems to be experiencing.
Yeah.
And her voice is slightly different than anybody else's voice because she's a dead girl and she's mocking continuously. Like, she seems to be a phantom that knows she's a phantom. So she's, even though she's dead, she still brings something to the plot, and I like that. I like that she's just a point of difference from anybody else. But the Will is really confusing because he even has characters mock him for seeming to be on his own hero's journey. Like, he seems to be on this path to redemption, and then whenever there's a crisis point where he's introduced into the family's life again, he's just a monster. He behaves like a villain. And there's this suggestion that the Will is deluded because he's just a really damaged person from all the abuse he suffered as a kid and all the bad things he's done since he's become an adult, that he thinks he's the hero of his own story. He thinks that he's somebody worth saving, but he actually just isn't. He's actually just a creep. Maybe that's what that... But it's unclear to me. And I think that comes back to your point about what does it mean? Like, whenever the Will is on his own adventures, he's very relatable. There's something going on there that's quite interesting. Whenever he's part of the A-plot again, I hate his guts.
Yeah, right.
I hate his guts because I feel like he's let me down. Like, nothing that he's gone through seems to have made any impact on him. And you talk about the fan base, but I went onto the Reddit group for Saga as prep for this, and a lot of people were talking about, what does it mean that the Will appears in issue 53 and 54 and he's like killing principal characters left and right, and he's doing all the really horrible things, and he's behaving like a robot. People described him as behaving as a robot. There was a sense that he's behaving in a strange way, and I don't think that's a character detail. I think that's the writing. I think it's the Deus Exi writing that has brought him in.
Well, that's okay. So he's an interesting case because it goes back to the business about the plot, and we haven't talked about what the book is about really. So this man and woman from these warring factions,
Alana and Marco,
have a relationship, have a baby.
Yep.
The governments
of both planets
find out about it, and they want the baby killed because they...
It's a propaganda. It'd be a propaganda disaster for them. Like,
yes,
if the
if
word
they find
gets
out that they've slept with the enemy. Okay, so
or that the races can sleep together, like as you're saying. Like,
why can they sleep together?
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, they sleep together. They have a baby. This is a problem because they want the war to continue, basically. And so they send these assassins, and we get 54 issues of the family on the run from assassins, and the Will is one of those. So what I wanted to get to, and it goes back to the plot and all that stuff, is every time he showed up, I was like, where was he last time? I could never remember what had happened to him.
That's the other thing as well.
Every time why is he in this hospital now? Why is he over here now? How did he get here again? And it blew my mind because it happened more than maybe 2 or 3 times, and I was like, okay, next time I'm going to try to remember where he was. Must have only been 4 or 5 issues. I don't know. Maybe it was 10 issues before. I don't remember, but he would disappear from the plot and he would reappear, and I just had no idea what state we were at with him. What was he supposed to be doing? What's he supposed to be doing now? And it was really confusing. And then he'd kind of disappear again, and I would not notice that he had disappeared again.
Yeah.
And then he'd show up, and I was like, oh yeah, he wasn't in it, but where was he? I don't know.
Yeah, Saga's like, candy floss on your tongue. Like, it just evaporates. It tastes nice. It's a nice sensation, but then it's gone. And then you
because it's not about anything.
No.
It's got a very basic message about... There's not even a message about war. It's just a war that is happening, and it's not even saying war is good or bad or make love not war, which is even vaguely kind of explicitly stated a couple of times. It's not really... What is the point of this except look how great these characters are that I've stitched together out of cliches of other characters.
Well, that's something of a running theme throughout the book, that Marco's pacifism is a conceit of his. That, he feels as if he's killed too many people and he needs to not take a life. And he talks about, I'm a lover, not a fighter. I think he says those words directly, as you mentioned. And that leads us right up to issue 54, where, like, he recently has killed. Like, he killed on Fang to save his family. Which was a bit weird, because after that, then he keeps talking about how he can't kill. And I was thinking, no, but you just did. You killed a bunch of people. You killed a bunch of people who are terrorizing your family.
Was Fang the planet that was a comet?
Yeah.
That was moving through space and
Yep.
yet didn't affect the light or gravity or atmosphere? Okay.
Let it go.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah.
those veins
And
rest.
every person was a humanoid that was 6 feet tall with 5 fingers. Yep. Okay, I'm letting it all go.
Yeah, let it go, man.
No, okay.
Let it go.
Yeah. All right.
So anyway, so he's taken a life,
Yeah.
and then at the very end, he once again has the opportunity to take a life, and he doesn't, and it proves potentially fatal for him. I think pretty fatal, but let's just leave it at that. And this idea then seemed to be emerging in the last couple of issues that Marco's pacifism is a pretense on his part, or it's a conceit. It's something that he feels good about himself for doing. And there's the suggestion that sometimes you need to fight. Sometimes, so the war is a senseless war because it's just being done by these respective races in order to make money, to profit. They clearly are just continuing it for the sake of continuing it. There's no real reason for them to fight. The fact that Alan and Marco can have a kid proves that these two races can commingle and everything. There's no reason why they should be separate. So there's that, this absurdity of war. But then there's also this notion creeping of the absurdity of Marco's pacifism. But no, it makes no sense for him to be a pacifist. He needs to protect his family. This guy's going to keep coming back. He's going to keep trying to kill them unless he stops him. And he chooses not to.
Yeah. Imagine if Garth Ennis had written this.
Oh, yeah. It would be, look, if Garth Ennis wrote this, it would be 5 issues, 6 issues tops. And you would have...
But the guilt Marco would feel and what killing he would do to protect his family... And that would weigh on his soul. Did any of these characters have souls? I don't know. They all just said... Was there any subtext? I felt like everybody said what they... It was like The Walking Dead. Everybody just said what they were thinking. They did what they said they would do, and they did what they said. Like, there was nothing under the surface.
They're two very similar books. The Walking Dead and Saga are two very similar books. I mean, they're both really consistent bestsellers for Image.
Yes. Yeah.
And at any time, you could hand me a volume and I could read it, and you then ask me, okay, what happened? And I wouldn't be able to tell you. Like, I would have read it, and I would have followed the story and understood the characters' motivations and, being able to recognize various characters because they tend to keep some in circulation so you can come back in. But I would not be able to explain to you what it all meant.
Well, it's interesting that dichotomy you're talking about with Marco's pacifism and the war going on, and I wonder if... Vaughan will actually state that explicitly at some stage because that will put him really into Walking Dead territory where he says exactly what's happening and what the themes are out of the mouth of one of the characters or if there actually is a subtext which I've missed or if it's there by accident, like he doesn't see his own contradiction.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to attempt a juxtaposition between the two titles, Walking Dead and Saga, I would argue that The Walking Dead is right-wing centrism writ large, and Saga is left-wing centrism writ large, in that they're both quite convinced of their own moral superiority. Right. But when you get down to it, they don't really mean anything.
Right. I think we've never done Walking Dead on the show, so I do want to say one thing about it. Because and it doesn't belong in this episode, but I watched the TV show for quite a while, and there was an episode where they got to a town, and so they'd been on the road for a long time, and Rick had grown this big beard, and they got to a town, and it was really nice and suburban, and they're like, okay, we're staying here for a while, and he shaved his beard, and that was it, and then they went on with the rest of the episode, and I thought if this was the comic, he would have shaved his beard and walked out, and somebody would have said, hey, you shaved, and he would have said, yeah, now that we're back in civilization, I'm going to be civilized again and shave.
Oh, he would actually
say it. Would have been
like
right. That in the comics. And I don't know if we got quite to that level here, but certainly people talk a lot about their feelings and exactly what they feel, and there's no reason to doubt what they're saying.
Yeah, well, I mean...
It's the opposite of The Sopranos, where nobody does what they say.
I was quite... Look, and I'm going to try and choose my words carefully here because I don't want to cause offense, but the character of Petrichor in Saga, who is a trans woman, is introduced, and she's a great character in terms of, like, she has a compelling narrative, she has motivation, and she sticks with the family for her own reasons. Okay?
Yeah.
Great. But towards the latter half of the series, already published, Hazel questions Petrichor on her genitalia, and Petrichor is like, oh, "Why are you asking me this?" and responds with anger, and then calms down because it's a child. Like, I need to be patient and tolerant with this child. And I felt that was a writer placing the character of Petrichor in an unfair position because she's had to answer those questions her entire life. This questioning of her very identity, her entire life. And to have a child do it was a sort of cheeky way of putting the character in that position again, but then saying, but it's a child. I mean, what are you going to do? It's a child. And that left me really uncomfortable because and then we had to have the character say, well, I am trans and people hate people who are trans and it's really sad and things along those lines. And it's just it was so declarative and there was no subtlety about it and no nuance. As you say, with like the Sopranos, at least there's the sense of meaning below the surface that's being touched on and every now and then coming to the fore. But here it was just like declarative. This is my thing. This is my situation. And because a child asked me, I need to just say it.
Well, this is so interesting. So I didn't have that reaction to it because maybe I'd been numbed to the constant talking at this stage of the series. But maybe if that had come several issues earlier when Petrichor first met the kid, and the first time she saw her penis, and said, "Why do you have?" If that conversation at that time, it would have been natural instead of being shoehorned in later.
It was a bit odd.
But it's kind of like, the homophobia I mentioned, which is just literal Earth homophobia. It's not. There's nothing outer spacey about it. My favorite episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is never on any best of list, is the one where Riker falls in love with that hermaphrodite.
Oh, that's a great episode.
I totally love it, and to me it's just so on the nose and so obvious, but I'm like, this is space fable. This is what I tuned in for. It's what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to get. And I felt like nothing was wrapped. There was no... it would be dumb, but if they could come up like the classic Trek episode with the black and white, the half blacks and half whites who are... Like, just do something even that dumb. And it's not. It's just, no, homosexuals are hated on this planet. And it's like, what are we here for? Why is this in space? That was the question I kept having.
Can I run another one at you?
Yeah.
Okay. So the character of... I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Upshur and Duff. So they're the two journalists.
Yep.
Did they remind you in any way of a grown-up and, I hesitate to say, more responsible, Dior and Quinch? Oh,
interesting. Do you mean...
In the look of them.
The physical look.
Yeah, their sort of appearance in the story... it's almost like Dior and Quinch got jobs and, like Dior lost some weight and, then they became journalists and fell in love,
I didn't make that connection.
There was something kind of goofy looking about them. They just looked...
It was the ears, certainly those fin ears, those fish fin ears. If I don't think it was deliberate.
And also they seem to bring an element of real world capitalism into the story where they're saying, no, we want to sell your experience to sell newspapers. Like, you've got a hot story and we're going to sell,
Yeah.
They sort of bring a mercantile sense of how this universe works into the proceedings and every now and then it does sort of tread, as you say, on real world things. Like the two soldiers who are working on the plan to shove Fang into that giant space monstrosity, whatever that thing is. I didn't quite follow what that was. They refer to a president, and they talk about this president in a way it seems Trump-esque. Again, there's sort of, and I was just listening to Tim's episode of Deconstructing Comics when he's doing Paper Girls. He did an episode of Paper Girls, and in Paper Girls, Vaughan can't help himself. There's all these sort of hints about Hillary Clinton's election and stuff like that.
Oh, that's him too.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also Vaughan.
All right.
And again, like, he's working with an amazing artist like Mike Chiang on Paper Girls. Paper Girls looks incredible. Like, it's a great looking book. But yeah, this sort of cheeky liberal sort of, I'm going to introduce some commentary into my story, and it's so writ large, and it's so just, as you said, like, Star Trek would do these sort of sledgehammer morality tales, but there was something charming about them. Whereas I feel like it's a man with a megaphone outside my window shouting at me.
Yeah. But what's he shouting?
I'm not really sure.
What's he really getting down to? Like, that's why I've mentioned Garth Ennis was like, when Garth Ennis is switched on and does one of those war stories, it really makes you feel like what it must be like to be stuck in a war and the kind of decisions you'd have to make and living with that. And I think he must have talked to a lot of veterans to do his books over the years. And I just felt like, is this... Like, I guess this book is a sort of anti-war message, but I didn't...
But is that it, maybe? Is that it? It's sort of... It's a book for people who would read this and go, I am tapping into some anti-war sentiment, but it's not making you feel the emotional cost of what that would actually mean. Like in a Garth Ennis book does, because a Garth Ennis will make you feel uncomfortable. A Garth Ennis will take you to a dark place.
It doesn't feel like a real war. Maybe that's part of the problem. Like, you don't feel like, who cares if this war ends or not? It didn't feel like it was a real... war. Like I said before, I have trouble believing that none of these people made it together. Really? It's so hard to swallow. It's artifice. Completely. Yeah, okay. Any other characters you want to go into there?
Just give me something. How did you find Isabel, the ghost girl? She's another one who had a sort of familiar tone of voice.
So, initially she showed up and I was annoyed because it was just another, hey, look at this weird character that's got her no legs and she's a ghost with just down to the waist, and then her intestines are hanging out at the bottom. And it was just like, okay, here's another cool visual, and then she just shows up and does stuff like everyone else. I'll tell you, the thing about the characters is... which reminded me, it might be a spoiler, but I'm not going to actually say it, but you'll guess. So many characters get killed off, and I felt like he was trying to be George R.R. Martin.
Sure.
And be like, look how intense this book is. All these characters you love, main characters are dying off. But he really, I don't think he pulled it off. They just died, and I was just like, so what? Like, okay, more characters show up, they're gonna die. Like, so what? So what? And we get to the end, before I was just like, I don't need to know. I'm not bothered.
All right, let's take a moment.
Okay.
Try to imagine the point of view of somebody who really loves Saga, who's really invested in these characters.
Yeah.
And they're listening to this right now.
Yeah, I want this. This is what I want. I need to be talked out of. I feel like I've gotten this whole thing wrong, and I need someone to talk me out of it.
And they're listening to the two of us, and they're thinking, these two sons of bitches
yes,
are completely heartless. Yes. I think it needs to be said that I have an investment in characters put in danger, and I have a sense of threat and danger whenever I read something where I really empathize with the principal characters. And with this, with Saga, I can't say I haven't been moved by it. I have. I can't say that there have been moments where I haven't felt a sense of, oh, what's going to happen next. But it's the sheer exhaustion that what did it for me.
That's true, yeah.
The fact it just kept happening.
Yeah.
And that's when I started switching off. So even to the point where in the last issue there was a great death to leave us on before the hiatus, I remember just closing the comic and just going, okay.
I think that might be similar to what I had with Why the Last Man, because when I read 10 issues, I was like, this book is awesome.
Sure.
And then when I read 20 or 25, I was like, this is dull. It's repetitive and boring and tedious. This is a job to get through these issues.
And here's the other thing as well. The candy floss illusion. The idea that, this book goes in your head and it goes right out again, I can absolutely see this being an issue seller. You get an issue, you read it, you feel great, you put it down.
Yeah.
You forget about it.
Yeah.
The next issue comes out, you read it, you feel great, you put it down.
Yeah, and have the letters page, like 10 pages of letters and cosplay and stuff, and I don't doubt it for a second. I understand it.
This comic is a consistent bestseller.
Yeah.
It's the one that people keep buying. It's giving them pleasure. They like it.
Yeah.
Who are we to deny them that? Like, if this is a book that makes you happy, fair play to you. But also, it's interesting to observe, this is a writer who has figured out whatever formula he has to just keep hooking readers in. Like they just keep coming back.
Yeah.
He's giving them something they want, and it's not something that we don't. It's something we don't seem to want.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, that's fine. There's other stuff.
Yeah.
And
Well, like that line about the soap operas, if you don't like it, do literally anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's more or less where I come down on. I don't object to Saga on the basis of any political metaphor or culture wars metaphor that might be interlaced into it, because I don't have an objection to that. I don't have any point of difference with the themes or messages in Saga whatsoever. I'm just not particularly interested in the story.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I even wrote it somewhere in my notes, I think this would have been a very different episode of Deconstructing Comics if we had only done 12 issues or 18.
Sure.
I think I would have been way less fatigued.
Sure.
And I would have been annoyed right from issue 1, but I would have been like, oh, this was annoying, but I would be more sympathetic.
Still time.
I would be more
around.
sympathetic to how people could love it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, can I just say, I feel like I've talked you down because you came in hot. And I feel like we're at a plateau now.
I feel like I did before we started recording. Like we were testing the mic levels, and I was like, I got to keep my voice down. And I've noticed it's been hitting the red, so I think we might have a very screechy recording. It's been hitting the red a lot while I've been talking. When I've noticed it,
it's okay. We can fix that.
God, yeah. What else is in my notes? So there's one. Yeah. So one of the things that I should have read this when I was talking about the narration going downhill.
Okay.
After the halfway point, there was a line about how the closer you get to someone, the more likely they'll leave suddenly. That's not true.
That's a very strange line.
What? Where is he? And we got to that kind of Sex in the City wisdom where they were just making up dialogue, making up wisdom that was not. It was just words.
You say Sex and the City. I think Doogie has her.
Well, I don't think I didn't watch it. I've watched more Sex in the City than
Doogie has her.
Doogie
He used to have a little moral at the end of his
well, this was Sex in the City was all. Meanwhile,
blah
blah was having this trouble with this guy, and there's usually a pun in there of some sort.
Yeah.
But just an observation, like the closer you get to someone, the more likely they'll leave suddenly. That's where did this observation come from? That's bizarre.
Yeah.
But it felt like that a lot at the end of the book.
What's the line about babysitters? There's a line that Hazel has that the best ones never leave you. And
oh yeah,
I was just kind of
like in your memory.
I guess.
Yeah, but maybe that's true. I don't remember any of my. I didn't have many babysitters, if any. But
I never had a babysitter growing up, which. Well, that's Catholic Ireland for you. But I never had a babysitter, so I didn't really relate to that. But I also didn't understand the concept of it either. I didn't quite understand what was being said.
That's what we get. So, especially the later end of the series, I think he's gotten into a zone where he's run out of his wisdom from the first half. There was a line about having kids, like, what's it like having kids? You're trading colds back and forth. That was true.
Sure. Yeah.
That was like one observation that was in there.
Again, like I said, like this, I was convinced to reread Saga because a dad recommended it to me.
Yeah, right.
Saying, this is my experience. This is exactly what it's like. And I was going, oh, I'm curious to see what that means. And then I read it and I was like, okay, I don't really follow, but fine.
So I think, unfortunately, why was interesting because it had all that gender stuff in it. It was actually about something. And it was literally about those things. But it was like that Next Generation episode where you find a literal science fictional way. Let's just kill off all the men on Earth, and that's the way you can address this issue. That to me is why we walk in the door for science fiction. The best science fiction is about the present, and that was you got it.
So I do remember when Why the Last Man was first announced, and the press release was published on Newsarama, and I happened to be reading it, and there were all these comments on the story. That's a really derivative story. That's a really derivative idea. That's terrible. Blah, blah, blah. And then Brian K. Vaughan, who is still a relatively unknown writer at the time, came into the thread. And he responded to this person saying he was derivative. He says, you haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm sure it's familiar to things you do know.
Yeah.
Because I would have read the same things.
Yeah.
But this is a story. I'm going to take it this
way.
Now, do you feel that while he is cobbling together his ideas from other sources, or he has his own personal spin, do you think he ever really delivers something that original or that unique?
With why I kind of felt it.
Right.
Like, I just loved... So, as soon as I opened it, and I think I even posted on a forum and nobody responded to this. I was still on forums at the time on the internet. Imagine.
I remember
forums. It's hard to remember those days, but I did because it reminded me of a book we've talked about before, Frank Herbert's The White Plague, where all the women on Earth die off.
Yes.
But that was not really about gender politics at all. But I found it was very interesting. It was that he did that with that, and I kind of loved that this it was the kind of, zombie tribes, in a zombie fiction where the tribes all form up. There were these Amazons that had cut off their breasts in the way Amazons would to use a bow and arrow. I thought that stuff was all really kind of fascinating, but I got tired by the stupid dialogue where everybody sounded the same, and somebody showed up with a katana at some stage, and I was like, no more, I hope I'm not misremembering that. But yeah, I hated the rhythm of it, and so I think the bottom line with Saga is, unfortunately, I came in, I didn't like Brian K. Vaughan's previous 2 books that I had read. I came in really looking forward to a science fiction book because I'd heard it was a good science fiction book and wanted to give him a chance because everybody says he's good, and I do believe I came in open-minded. Within 1 issue, he'd already shot bullet holes through the expectations I came in with, and unfortunately for me, at the end it's come out worse than Y, because I felt like Y was about something as literal as it was about those things. At least it had a very issue after issue was like, guess what, 95% of airplane pilots are men. Now there's only women on, like, everything was affected.
Yep.
And I like that aspect of it. It was like the on-the-noseness of Star Trek. So it had something for me. This was really empty calories, I felt.
Yeah. Speaking personally, while the plot does move you along, I can see why it's something that you can consume really easily. For me, Saga is Fiona Staples' book.
Okay.
Her character design, her use of space, the use of color, and Hazel's narration. I love the visual effect of Hazel's written narration on the panel. She would be why I would read Saga. But honestly, I don't see any reason to return after this hiatus.
Do you think they switched the credits order around at issue 31 because it's the halfway point? Do you think 60 might be the end of it?
No. No, I think there is a planned 20-issue continuing storyline.
Okay.
I might have plucked that figure out of thin air, but I seem to remember something that Vaughan has teased that, there's just one or 2 more arcs to go before it's all over. Okay. No, I think they switched around the credit line as just a tribute to this ongoing debate about the writer and the artist in comics, and it was a political move. It was sort of nailing their colours to the mast that Staples' role as creator in this book is as, if not more, important than Vaughan's. And, fair play, because I think she makes the book. And the thing that I remember is these freaky aliens that she introduces.
Well, that's the that's the sugar in the book, right?
Yeah.
Is the character designs, the alien designs.
Yeah.
They're awesome. The writer's not holding up his end of the deal and actually making something of those, explaining why there's 3 different types of wings on this planet.
You're really upset about that.
And why this comet is flying through space and people are just hanging out on there.
And Alana's facial expressions, like the way she reacts to things.
Yeah.
She's a very strong character visually. Like, I have a sense of who she is. I'm not just relying on Vaughan's words in her mouth.
Yeah.
The way she looks, the way she acts, the way she behaves, I get a sense of that from Staples' art, and she is one of the more interesting characters in the book as a result of that. And Gus, I love Gus.
Yeah. Okay, so definitely some pluses. I can understand why people like it.
Yeah.
I think they should go on liking it. Oh boy, did I hate it.
I think we'll leave it on that.
Okay.
Saga is published by Image. Here at deconstructingcomics.com, we produce Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Poles. If you like our shows and want to support them, pledge at patreon.com/deconcomics. Help us make our next goal and unlock more vintage episodes. Also, please help us get noticed by reviewing us on Apple or any other podcast source. We'd really appreciate it if you gave us a star rating there and a short review. Even if it's just a sentence, tell the world why you enjoy Deconstructing Comics. Another way to show your appreciation is simply to write to us. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or contact us through social media. Find all the links on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. We're also on the Comics Podcast Network at comicspodcasts.com and on comicon.com, where our new episodes usually go up on the Friday before they appear in our feed. Our theme is from bensound.com. Last Thursday on To the Bat Poles, we discussed Part 1 of the Londinium trilogy and Paul's visit to the Batman 66 exhibit at the Hollywood Museum in Los Angeles. Listen to the Bat Poles in its own podcast feed on Apple Podcasts or other podcast apps, or at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com. A video of Paul's visit to the museum can be found in the Deconstructing Comics YouTube channel. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our bi-weekly spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. The next episode will appear next Monday. Then in 2 weeks on this show, I interview Michael Kupperman of Snake and Bacon and Tales Designed to Thrizzle fame, and Kumar and I review Michael's latest book, All the Answers, about how his father was forever haunted by his fame on the radio and TV show Quiz Kids, and how the fallout from that fame affected Michael himself growing up. It's an awesome book and a great interview, if I do say so myself, so be here in 2 weeks for that. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.